This video is going to take you through the first half of Chapter 24, the nutrition part of Chapter 24. First question it asks you is, the majority of nutrients that we eat are used to make what? ATP. That process is going to be called cellular respiration. Next I ask you to define kilocalorie. This is the definition right here. One of the things that is confusing about a kilocalorie is actually confusing about the base calorie. So there's a lowercase c calorie, which is the amount of energy it takes to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And then there's a capital C calorie. This is the same thing as a kilocalorie. When you see calories on a food label, they're actually telling you how many kilocalories are in the food. So they're using a capital C calorie. Yeah, Americans just don't understand the metric system, and so we screwed it all up. But capital C calorie is the same thing as a kilocalorie. This is what you always see on food labels. When you're supposed to eat the supposed 2,000 calorie a day diet, it's a capital C calorie diet. Okay, your major nutrients are your carbs, your proteins, and your lipids. You need these in higher quantities than you do your micronutrients, which are like your vitamins and minerals. This isn't really discussed in your textbook, but it's something that doctors are starting to pay a little bit more attention to. C-reactive protein is something that you get if you eat a bad diet. So you get more of it if you eat a crappy diet that is filled with processed foods. It's linked to inflammation and increased risk in heart disease, hypertension, just all sorts of problems. And so if they are finding that you're starting to have problems with your health, one of the things that the doctor might measure is C-reactive protein, especially if they think you're lying to them about, oh, I eat a great diet, but you're not really. This is sort of the proof that you're not eating a good diet. Okay, essential nutrients. Anytime you see that word essential in front of a nutrient, what it means is you need it, but you can't make it for yourself. Your body can convert some forms of carbohydrates to other forms, so not all carbohydrates are essential nutrients. But the ones that are the ones that you can't make for yourself or convert to make for yourself. What we're essentially going to be doing for the next little bit is completing the table that's at the back of, at the bottom of page 1. We're kind of going to be formatting it after table 24.1 in the notes, and so I've got food sources, I've got your RDA, what happens if you eat too much or too little. I've also added a column for what do you need them for to begin with, and so that's what we're going to be talking about as we go through here. So carbohydrates are generally classified as either a complex carb or a simple carb. Complex carbohydrates are your polysaccharides. That would be like starch or cellulose, the things that you're eating that can supply you with a fair amount of energy. Complex carbs tend to be better regulators of your blood sugar level. They tend to be packed with more minerals than simple carbs. So when you eat a diet, your diet should have more complex carbohydrates in them and fewer simple carbs in them. The RDA does not separate out simple from complex carbs. So the RDA is for both of those all put together, which is why I've merged those two columns in the most recent set of notes. So your carbohydrate should make up somewhere around 50% of the total caloric intake that you consume during the course of a day. So again, let's go back to that fictitious 2,000 calorie a day diet. About 1,000 calories should be coming from complex carbohydrates. This just also is showing you the anatomy of a grain. When they talk about something being whole grain, it means you get all of this, but usually pressed up or mashed. They don't filter things out. When they make stuff like white bread, what they do is they take the bran off and then they mash the endosperm. Well, all the fiber and the minerals are in the bran. So when they take that out, they're taking out a lot of the nutrients that you actually need, and all they're including is the starch that had been in the endosperm. So you want your grain to include all the grain, not just the endosperm. If you eat too much of any of your major or macronutrients, you're going to gain weight because they all supply you with calories. So excess will always be a weight gain sort of an issue. Then for simple carbs specifically, simple carbs are usually just called sugars. That would be like glucose, fructose. Sugar is a simple carb even though it is a disaccharide. Anytime you eat more simple carbohydrates, your bacteria that live in your mouth and in your GI system can ferment those. Specifically in the mouth though, when they ferment them, they produce acids, and those acids can wear away the teeth enamel. So eating a diet that is higher in simple sugars can increase your risk of developing cavities. Also for the back half of that, probably at some point in your life you were the kid who decided to eat all of their Halloween candy all on one night. Well, how'd you feel after that? That's what this symptom is talking about, the GI discomfort and bloating. If you eat a whole bunch of carbs in one sitting, it's going to make you feel just bleh. For your deficits, any of your major nutrients, if you don't get enough of them, it can cause weight loss. Ketoacidosis, though, is specific for this. So one of the new fad diets that's out there is keto diet. If you don't consume carbs, your body is going to start to rely more on fats and proteins as your fuel sources. And when your body does that, there's all these additional components that can't be fed directly into cellular respiration, and you have to deal with those components. Like in the case of protein, you have to deal with the nitrogen part. In the case of the fats, what happens is your body starts to make ketones. Ketones are acids, they're metabolic acids. So whenever you are relying more on fat as an energy source, your body's pH starts to drop. Now, if you can regulate that exactly right, you can maintain ketoacidosis and still be healthy and lose weight. However, most people don't do it right, and ketoacidosis can put you into a coma and then kill you. And so do it wrong and you literally die. And so don't do that diet unless you're working with your doctor about it. Then for carbohydrates, you're going to be feeding them into cellular respiration so that you can specifically generate ATP, and so they're your fuel source. After that, for your simple, the only thing new to fill in here is the food sources. So any of your processed foods that are sort of designed to try to make you think they're yummy so you'll eat more of them, like these guys off over here, those are going to have sugar in them. Sometimes the sugar is a preservative, but more often than not, it's just there to make you want it more. Fruit does also have simple sugars, but fruit also has fiber, and then it has minerals that is in the cells of the fruit. And so while you should not eat a ton of fruit, it's better than eating a ton of Skittles, essentially. This is just your refresher again. So these are your simple sugars, your monosaccharides. If you get any two of these and put them together, you get a disaccharide. We talked about lactose last semester. Remember that in order for you to absorb these, you have to break a disaccharide down to the constituent monosaccharides. And then polysaccharides like starch or glycogen, in this case, it's just a bunch of glucoses all bonded together. And so you want to eat more of this, the complex carbs, and then avoid these in your diet because they are added sugars in most cases. All right, fiber is a specific type of carbohydrate that has its own RDA. The RDA varies depending on whether you're male or female and what age you are, but generally speaking, if you're an adult, you should be getting somewhere between 25 grams a day for a girl to 30 to 35 grams a day for a guy, depending on what source you're looking at. Any plant material is going to have fiber in it because fiber is a component of a plant cell wall. I've never really seen a person eat too much fiber based on the food logs that I grade for nutrition courses. If you do, it can cause some blockages. Deficits are what I see more often, and that can lead to constipation, which, remember, constipation can lead to some problems like hemorrhoids and increasing your risk of colon cancer. If you don't get enough fiber, there is also a link between fiber and cholesterol levels in your bloodstream, so try to make sure you're getting the amount that you're supposed to get during the course of a day. Next up, for your lipids, these are your fats, your oils, and then like real fats. They should be making up about 25% of your daily caloric intake. Your excesses and deficits are fairly self-explanatory. Your uses, it kind of depends on which fat you're talking about. You can use them as a fuel source. That's going to be triglycerides. Your body does use it as insulation to help you maintain your body temperature, especially if you live in colder climates. You do use especially cholesterol, which is a type of lipid, to make some of your hormones like testosterone and estrogen. And then remember that your cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, and so you need lipids to make all of your cellular membranes. Now, a subcategory of lipids is essential fatty acids. Remember what essential meant earlier. You need it, but you can't make it for yourself. The two that we're going to talk about are lenoleic and lenolenic fatty acids. Those fatty acids can be found in virtually any vegetable oil, and yet most of the time when people start talking about them, they talk about fish. Yes, fish is good for you. It's a nice lean source of protein that does have these fatty acids that are good for you in them, but you can get them from other sources too. So if you just hate fish, don't count them out. You can still get them in these other ways. The RDA, I pulled this from the nutrition textbook because your textbook doesn't really tell you how much you're supposed to have. One of the problems that can go along with this is if you eat too much of this one, lenoleic, it makes you have a deficiency of this one, and then the reverse of that is also true. So you have to try to balance how much of each one of those you get during the course of the day so that one doesn't sabotage the other. Which I kind of mentioned that right there too. Deficits, because of what these are used for in your body, making cell membranes, you can get cognitive defects if you don't get enough of these. This is why a lot of people are taking fish oil supplements, is they think it will help them with their memory, which if they're not getting enough a day, it can. It is also a component of the retina, and so it can also contribute to eye problems if you don't get enough of them, and then that's just what your uses are for, which again, your book doesn't really go into that all that much, so there's what it's used for. Cholesterol and trans fat are another subdivision of your lipids. Cholesterol, you're supposed to eat less than 300 milligrams per day. Your liver can make cholesterol, so even if you don't get that much, you should still have enough for what your purposes are during the course of the day. Trans fat is not something that naturally occurs in nature. It's something that we made in a lab, and you're not supposed to have any of it. So just avoid it in general. If you eat too much of either of these, it can lead to high cholesterol levels, which again can lead to problems with hypertension, cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, blah, blah, blah. That said, you do still need a little bit of cholesterol. Yes, your liver can make some, but it's always a good idea to include that little bit that you're supposed to have during the day, because again, you can't make your sex hormones without cholesterol, and it does help stabilize your cell membranes. I already answered that, really. Okay. Proteins are subdivided into complete and incomplete, and what those words have to do with is the number of amino acids that are present in a protein. What you need to remember from AMP1 is there are 20 different amino acids. If you eat a complete protein, it contains all 20 of those amino acids, and so you're going to have all the ingredients that you need to make your own proteins. However, an incomplete protein is missing at least one of those 20 amino acids. So complete proteins tend to come from animals, so think steak, pork, chicken, lamb, eggs, and all of your dairy products. The proteins that are in those are complete proteins, so they're giving you everything that you need in relation to the amino acids. Now, there are specific calculations that you can do. At 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight will tell you exactly how much protein you are supposed to eat during the course of a day. However, you can do a rough estimate and say it's about 25% of your daily caloric intake. Most Americans are in this excesses category for proteins. They think there's no such thing as a bad protein, and they just shove it all in their face. So what I want to point out is, yes, too much protein can make you fatter. It does also play around with your calcium levels, and so it increases your risk of bone loss, and then that calcium has to go someplace, and it tends to form stones in the kidneys if you eat too much. So again, you can have too much of a good thing. You need proteins, but you need the right amount of proteins. If you don't get enough, you can have some very major problems because you use proteins for everything. Remember, antibodies are proteins, so they have an immune function. The transport proteins in your bloodstream, like hemoglobin and albumin, those are proteins, and so you need them for that. You need them for body structures, you need them for hormones, and so they're very important things that you need to have. Incomplete food sources, protein sources come from plants. This is not to say that plants are not good sources of proteins. It's to say that if you are a strict vegan that only eats plant material, you have to plan your diet well to make sure you get all 20 of the amino acids that you're supposed to get during the course of the day. Sorry. So, this is to show you that point that I was kind of coming back to. These are your essential amino acids. These are the ones that you need, but you can't make for yourself. If you are relying mostly on grains, what you need to notice is you would be missing out on isoleucine and lysine. These are two amino acids that, again, you need to make your own proteins. And you wouldn't be able to do that if you relied only on grains to get your protein sources. If, on the other hand, you relied more on legumes like green beans, peas, soybeans, whatever, you'd be missing out on these amino acids up here, which methionine is the start amino acid for all your proteins, so it's a very important one. The other ones that are in parentheses here, you can convert methionine to cysteine, but if you don't have enough methionine, you can't make the cysteine. So it is conditionally an essential amino acid. Same with tyrosine off down here. If you don't get enough phenylalanine, you can't make the tyrosine like you're supposed to. So just make sure you mix and match your plant materials, and you'll still get all the amino acids that you need. All right, we already talked about these two earlier. They're just essential fatty acids, dang it. And we already talked about all the stuff with them on their table thing on the last, on the last page. Explain nitrogen balance. So nitrogen is present in all of the proteins that you eat because amino acids all contain an amino group, which is this NH2 group right here. The problem with those is cellular respiration doesn't have any room for nitrogen. All it can deal with is carbons, oxygens, and hydrogens, and so this nitrogen has to be dealt with. So if you eat X amount of protein during the course of the day, you get this amount of nitrogen in your body. Well, you have to get rid of that same X amount of nitrogen, and you do that by making urine and then peeing that out. So your nitrogen in the form of proteins has to equal your nitrogen going out. All right, vitamins. These are micronutrients or minor nutrients, depending on how you want to look at it. You still need them, but you need them in much smaller amounts. So where your carbohydrates was being measured in grams, some of your vitamins are being measured in micrograms, and so you don't need nearly as many of them. Vitamins are defined as organic molecules, so they're always going to have carbon and hydrogen in them. They are usually going to be working as coenzymes, so they help specific enzymes in your body do the function that enzyme was supposed to do. What that means is if you don't get enough of a vitamin that was supposed to help this enzyme, that enzyme can't do its job, so there's a reaction that can't occur in your body like it was supposed to. So this just defines that coenzyme for you once again, and sorry, I don't know what language this is. I think it's German, but not sure. So if this were the enzyme, this coenzyme helps to maintain the shape of the active site on the enzyme so that the substrate can bind and we can do the reaction. But if the coenzyme isn't there, it changes the shape of the active site so that the substrate can't fit in it anymore, and so we can't do what we were supposed to do with that anymore. So we need those coenzymes to help our enzymes carry out their functions. Now, vitamins can be classified as either water-soluble or fat-soluble. All your fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins A, D, E, and K. We talked in the last chapter about where you would absorb them, so that should be good. Now, one of the problems with fat-soluble vitamins is because they're soluble in fat, if you consume too much of a fat-soluble vitamin, you will store the excess in your body. And just like with proteins, you can have too much of a good thing. This picture is from a person who ate too much vitamin A in the form of beta-carotene. Essentially what they were doing was eating carrots for every single meal, and their body actually put that excess vitamin A behind the retina and separated it from the blood supply, so they went permanently blind as a result of having too much vitamin A in their diet. So yes, you can have too much of a good thing when it becomes a fat-soluble vitamin. Water-soluble vitamins is vitamin C plus all the B vitamins. Those get absorbed into the capillaries, as we mentioned in the previous chapter. If you eat too much of those, you'll just pee out the excess. There was even a joke in the Big Bang Theory about if you take multivitamins, you're just making your pee more expensive, and that's because if you're consuming an excess, you do just pee it out. So that does, however, mean it doesn't usually build up to toxic levels. It's very hard to overdose on the water-soluble vitamins. I'm not saying it's not possible, it's just a lot more difficult to do with water-soluble than it is with fat-soluble. Next up, your minerals. So these are inorganic, either elements or just atoms, and most of the case it's just going to be atoms, like a calcium atom or ion. Magnesium, phosphorus, there's a whole bunch of them, but they're things you can find on the periodic table. Most of these are going to be helping enzymes function as well, but because they're inorganic, they're called cofactors, not coenzymes. Okay, after that, you guys are in the table. You should already know which are fat or water soluble based on the slide a couple of clicks ago. So A, D, E, and K are your fats. All of the other ones are your B vitamins. If you forget that and I go too fast through it, on the PDF of the PowerPoint, you can just scroll over the picture and it will tell you which it is, if it's fat or water soluble. I'm going to go really fast, so just pause it so that you can get what you need on any of these if I did happen to go too fast for them. So vitamin A, the precursor to that is beta-carotene, and beta-carotene has a yellowy-orange color to it, so eat any vegetable that's yellowy-orange and you're probably going to be getting plenty of vitamin A. Seriously, 1 carrot gets you all you need for the course of a day. Well, depending on the size of that carrot, but these are some other sources that are really good ones. What you're going to see as we go through here is deep green vegetables show up on nearly every single one of the vitamins, and that's because deep green vegetables are about the healthiest thing that you can eat for yourself. They have a lot of minerals, they have a lot of fiber, they have a lot of vitamins in them, and so if you don't eat enough green vegetables like spinach or kale or collard greens, then you might be not getting all of the nutrients that you're supposed to have. So when in doubt about what you should eat, throw some spinach in there. Vitamin A is supposed to help you be able to see. Incidentally, that person that I mentioned earlier who was blind, he was eating the carrots with every meal because he had heard it could help you see, but he went blind because he ate too much of them. So just don't overconsume. Eat enough, not too much. It does also work as an antioxidant, and so I want to describe what that is. As you carry out the process of cellular respiration, your body makes these things called free radicals. I kind of want you to imagine free radicals like they're little spiky balls. And as those spiky balls travel through your body, they bounce off things and they damage things as they bounce off. What antioxidants do is they essentially cover up the spikes so that the free radicals can't harm you anymore. So the more antioxidants you have, the more free radicals you neutralize so that they're not harming you anymore. Thiamine is vitamin B1. This one, if you are a meat eater, you should be okay, and it's been fortified into basically everything. Now, most of the time when a vitamin's a coenzyme, I'm not going to make you know what enzyme it's helping. There's going to be 3 exceptions to that. This isn't one of them. It's just a coenzyme. Riboflavin is one of the exceptions to that. One of the things we're going to talk about in the second half of this chapter is electron carriers. They are used during cellular respiration. They pick up electrons during the earlier steps, and then they drop them off at the electron transport chain. Well, FAD is one of those electron carriers, and the F is actually flavin. Riboflavin is what gives the flavin to flavin adenine dinucleotide, which is one of those electron carriers. And so this vitamin helps that coenzyme, which helps you carry out cellular respiration. Next up, niacin, vitamin B3. This is a component of NAD. It's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. If it helps you to remember the 2 N's go together, awesome. This is going to help another one of those electron carriers. Pantothenic acid is also known as vitamin B5. This one, basically, again, if you're eating something, it probably has pantothenic acid in it. This is a component of coenzyme A, which is part of the transition step and the very initial part of the Krebs cycle during cellular respiration. And we're going to talk about coenzyme A a little bit more when we get to the second half of this chapter. Vitamin B6 is also called pyridoxine. You can get that from, again, any of these things up here, and it's just a general antioxidant. It's just general coenzyme, pardon me. Folic acid we talked about a little bit last semester. Do make sure you write off to the side of this one that if a pregnant woman does not get enough, her baby can end up with neural tube defects like the spina bifida that we talked about last semester. The rest of that stuff, just make sure you get it. Vitamin B12, remember that this one was special because you needed intrinsic factor to absorb it. We also talked about pernicious anemia in a couple of earlier chapters, and so pernicious anemia is what you'll develop if you don't get enough of this. Again, eat any meat and you're good. So most of the time if you see a person with B12 deficiency, it's because they're a vegan and they aren't really doing a good job of planning their diet out. Biotin, it's argued whether that's a real vitamin that you need or not. It seems to help with hair growth and skin health. Aside from that, there's not really a heck of a lot going on when it comes to biotin. It's just a coenzyme. Vitamin C, also known as ascorbic acid. Basically any citrus fruit. So there was a reason that like sailors and pirates used to say things like, "You old limey bastard." Pirates used to have a lime and they would like just have the peel in their mouth, and that's because limes have a lot of vitamin C in them, and so they would have that so that they wouldn't get scurvy. Everybody thinks scurvy is this like old school pirate disease. You can still find it today, especially in homeless individuals, and so don't think that it's just an old school disease. If a person is starving, they can still get scurvy. In fact, there has been a couple of cases in the last couple of years where college students who were relying on like ramen noodles and beer to live their lives, they developed scurvy because they weren't eating very well in college. And so it is still something that you see periodically. The last 3, D, E, and K, these are your fat-soluble vitamins. We talked about vitamin D last semester because it helps you absorb calcium. We talked about rickets when we were talking about bones. Vitamin E is a vitamin that most of my students don't get nearly enough of. This goes back to oils and nuts. Make sure you're trying to consume enough of those during the course of the day. It's a very potent antioxidant. It is one, however, that you do not want to overdose on, because if you build up too much of this, bad things can happen in your body. Vitamin K, you can get it from green tea. Your normal flora, if it's healthy, will make some more of this for you. It is one of the clotting factors that helps your blood clot so that you don't bleed to death. So that should help you get through all the material that is going to be on exam 3.